Hi, welcome to the HealthScore Longevity Report. My name is Nick. Each week we focus on an article in the top-tier peer-reviewed medical literature that addresses the topic of longevity. I will summarize the article, place it in the broader context of what's already known, make recommendations for how to adopt the discoveries made in the article in your own life, and I will share with you what I personally do. This week, we're looking at a review article on the increasing rate of early-onset colorectal cancer. We're talking about colorectal cancer, cancer of the colon or rectum, that occurs in people under age 50. This review article was published in the highly prestigious New England Journal of Medicine in April 2022. Before we talk about colorectal cancer in particular, let's get a broader idea of what causes Americans to die. The number one leading cause of death in the U.S. is heart disease. That's heart attacks and stroke. Number two is cancer. So we're talking about we're talking about a topic that deals with the number two leading cause of death in the U.S. If we look at what types of cancer Americans get, we have most common is breast, followed by prostate, and lung or bronchus, number three. Colorectal cancer is the fourth leading cause of cancer in the U.S., and it is the second leading cause of death. What we're talking about is cancer, number two cause of death in the U.S., and colorectal cancer in particular, which is the number two cause of cancer death in the U.S. To give you more context still, cancer rates and cancer mortality have decreased in the past 20 years. The only exception to that, and why there's now a review article in the New England Journal of Medicine, is colorectal cancer in people under age 50. Under age 50 is below the age that until recently, screening was even recommended. We didn't even look for colorectal cancer until recently in people under age 50. When we're trying to understand how this cancer could be increasing in the population while all other cancers and all other mortality from cancers are decreasing, we have to think about what's changed in the past 40 to 50 years to account for the increasing incidence of this cancer. And what most researchers implicate in the increasing colorectal cancer in younger populations is an unhealthy diet. But going with that are all of the usual suspects when we talk about chronic disease and mortality. Tobacco use, excessive alcohol, again, unhealthy diet, but also physical inactivity, overweight and obesity, and a low vitamin D level. Let's look at the evidence for each of these causal factors. If you want to learn more about any of the topics, you can look at the show notes below and click links to the full articles. Tobacco use, to no one's surprise, increases cancer risk and colorectal cancer by 26%. Next is alcohol use. Alcohol use is safe if it's not consumed. So being abstinent from alcohol, no risk in colorectal cancer. And actually having one drink per day or 7 drinks per week, no increased risk of colorectal cancer. The risk begins at 2 servings or more per day or more than 7 servings per week, which is contrary to the most recent guidelines in the U.S. that say that for men, 2 servings or less is safe per day. You actually want to keep alcohol consumption to 1 serving or less to reduce mortality and colorectal cancer disease risk. Red meat increases colorectal cancer by 12%. Red meat is defined as beef, pork, and lamb. A lot of people are surprised when they hear that pork is considered red meat. That's because the pork lobby has been so successful at convincing us that pork is the other white meat. But in fact, pork, beef, and lamb are red meat. Red meat is defined as containing heme iron, and that's responsible for the redness of the meat as well as the harm from eating the red meat. Processed meat increases colorectal cancer risk by 18%. This is any meat that contains sodium nitrate or nitrite, a preservative. It's found in bacon, cold cuts, sausage, jerky. Next is sugar-sweetened beverages. For each serving of sugar-sweetened beverage consumed per day, there's a 16% higher risk of colorectal cancer. Now, sugar-sweetened beverages virtually didn't exist before high fructose corn syrup in the late 70s, so we have something introduced into the diet that is clearly recent and could account for, to some extent, the increasing risk of early-onset colorectal cancer. Next is a lack of whole grains. Yes, I'm sorry to say it, keto lovers and paleo dieters, but not eating whole grains increases risk of colorectal cancer by 17%. A sedentary lifestyle increases risk. When comparing the least active to most active individuals, there's a 27% higher risk of colorectal cancer for the least active. And independent of physical activity is watching television. Television watching confers up to a 69% higher risk of colorectal cancer. If you take people who don't watch television or watch less than 7 hours of television per week, an hour a day, there's no increased risk. But at 7.1 hours per week and greater, the risk begins to increase. Highest at over 14 hours per week, 69% higher risk. Overweight and obesity increases colorectal cancer risk. We're talking about having a body mass index, which is calculated your kilograms body weight per your height in meters squared. You can look it up online, but a BMI of 25 or greater increases colorectal cancer risk by up to 41%. The higher the BMI, the higher the risk. And finally, a low vitamin D level. If you take someone with a vitamin D level that's under 12 nanograms per milliliter and compare it to someone whose vitamin D level is 35 or greater, there's a up to 58% higher risk of colorectal cancer for the vitamin D deficient individual. So how do we understand how all of these disparate lifestyle factors can lead to the same outcome, which is colorectal cancer? Researchers have described gut dysbiosis as the underlying mechanism. So for the past 3 million years, we've fed on a mostly plant-based diet. This diet affords our colon a lot of fiber. So when we eat something, it goes through our stomach, our small intestine, and if it's not digested, like fiber, it ends up in the large intestine where our bacteria reside. We have these bacteria that are able to ferment, digest the fiber, and form small chain fatty acids like butyrate. These are highly beneficial to the health of the gut lining and to our overall health. These small chain fatty acids reduce inflammation. They modulate our immune response. They can prevent colorectal cancer from occurring, prevent progression of tumors once they arise. Gut dysbiosis is the derangement of this gut bacteria. When we don't have a diet that's high in plant fiber, we are not able to feed these, let's call them good gut bacteria that make these small chain fatty acids that are so anti-inflammatory and good for our health. When we don't feed these good gut, they die off and are replaced by bad gut bacteria. That's defined as bacteria that cause damage to the intestinal lining. These bad gut bacteria can penetrate the intestinal epithelium, trigger the immune response, trigger inflammation, directly cause DNA damage, resulting in ultimately tumors. They can not only help with the initiation of tumors, they can help with progression of tumors, and they can even prevent the effectiveness of common chemotherapy drugs. Now, the only reason that these gut bacteria were able to make their homes and cause their damage in our gut lining was the reduction in the good, healthy bacteria because of the lack of plant fiber in our diet. The bottom line is that early onset colorectal cancer in people under age 50 is on the rise, and there are lifestyle factors that are the prime drivers of this increase. What I recommend, if you've heard something today that applies to you, one of these causal factors or more, that's what to set your sights on. That should be your priority for improving your health. Quitting smoking, decreasing alcohol use, improving your diet, being more active, getting your body mass index under 25, keeping your vitamin D levels high, and then finally getting screened. So just to give you a little bit more detail so you can implement these recommendations, when we're talking about whole grains, the ideal amount is 60 grams or more. That's about a cup of cooked whole grains. When we're talking about limiting red meat, that's beef, pork, and lamb, and it's not exceeding 6 ounces per week. When we're talking about limiting processed meat, that's anything with sodium nitrate or nitrite, not more than 3 ounces per week. Frankly, for red meat and processed meat, I would say none at all is best. But the literature really shows that the risk increases at 3 ounces of processed meat or 6 ounces of red meat per week. Be physically active. This has several components. The medical literature shows there are about 5 factors when it comes to physical activity, from aerobic exercise to strength training to reducing sitting time and bouts of sitting duration. If you want to know more about exercise and longevity, you can click on the download below. And then finally, let's talk about screening. So screening, you can't always prevent colorectal cancer. If you follow all of the recommendations, you'll drastically reduce your risk, but colorectal cancer will inevitably occur in some people. And the key at that point for longevity and for health outcomes is to detect it early. There are highly effective modalities for detecting colorectal cancer early. And as of May 2021, those modalities are now recommended for people age 45 or older. Shockingly, only 68% of U.S. adults are getting these screenings done, despite the fact that they're covered by all insurance companies and drastically reduce risk of mortality and progression of colorectal cancer by early detection. The best modality for colorectal cancer screening is considered a colonoscopy done every 10 years, starting at age 45. But there are other less invasive modalities that are similarly effective. CT scanning every 5 years and stool testing every 1 to 2 years, depending on the test. I want to share with you some highlights of what I personally do. Let's start with whole grains because they're so unpopular in the paleo keto world. Whole grains are not part of a keto diet or a paleo diet, but they are part of a diet that confers longevity and decreases risk of colorectal cancer. So I recommend you eat them. It is important to go against the grain on this topic. Now, we're talking about getting 60 grams of whole grains per day, and that's about a cup of cooked. So I will make overnight oats every 4 days, keep them in a Tupperware in the fridge, have them between lunch and dinner. I add yogurt or cottage cheese, nuts, and fruit. Absolutely delicious. I have also whole grains on salad every day. we're talking about anything from farro to quinoa, brown rice, sorghum, millet. There's so many whole grains. If you buy an Instant Pot and go to a Whole Foods and you go to a health food store with bulk section, you can get over a dozen types of whole grains. I will cook in an Instant Pot every 4 days, a batch of whole grains, add them to salad for lunch every day. Next, I avoid red meat completely and processed meat completely. I will have tempeh, which is fermented soybeans for dinner as my protein. I'll have edamame, which is not fermented, just the soybean itself. I'll have seafood, opting for rich in omega-3 seafood like salmon. And I'll have chicken and turkey. For lunch, I'll often have a cold cut. I have turkey or chicken, and I will have organic turkey or chicken cold cuts, which do not have the nitrites that we talked about. Thank you very much for your time. You can download my 5 essential cancer screenings at the link below, including colorectal cancer, where you can look at the different screening options. You can access the full list of HealthScore PDF tips at HealthScore Longevity Facebook group. Please become a member. And please tune in next week. We'll be talking about treatment of tobacco smoking, the most effective strategies for quitting tobacco. Thank you for your time and have a great week.